Part 1 The Idea. Chapter 1. Deep work is valuable. As election day loomed in 2012, traffic at the New York Times website spiked, as is normal during moments of national importance. But this time, something was different. A wildly disproportionate fraction of this traffic, more than 70% by some reports, was visiting a single location in the sprawling domain. It wasn't a front-page breaking news story, and it wasn't commentary from one of the paper's Pulitzer Prize-winning columnists. It was instead a blog run by a baseball stats geek turned election forecaster named Nate Silver. Less than a year later, ESPN and ABC News lured Silver away from the Times, which tried to retain him by promising a staff of up to a dozen writers in a major deal that would give Silver's operation a role in everything from sports to weather to network news segments to, improbably enough, Academy Awards telecasts. Though there's debate about the methodological rigor of Silver's hand-tuned models, there are few who deny that in 2012 this 35-year-old data whiz was a winner in our economy. Another winner is David Heinemeier Hansson, a computer programming star who created the Ruby on Rails website development framework, which currently provides the foundation for some of the web's most popular destinations, including Twitter and Hulu. Hansson is a partner in the influential development firm Basecamp, called 37 Signals until 2014. Hansson doesn't talk publicly about the magnitude of his profit share from Basecamp or his other revenue sources, but we can assume they're lucrative given that Hansson splits his time between Chicago, Malibu, and Marbella, Spain, where he dabbles in high-performance race car driving. Our third and final example of a clear winner in our economy is John Doerr, a general partner in the famed Silicon Valley venture capital fund Kleiner Perkins Caufield and Byers. Doerr helped fund many of the key companies fueling the current technological revolution, including Twitter, Google, Amazon, Netscape, and Sun Microsystems. The return on these investments has been astronomical. Doerr's net worth, as of this writing, is more than $3 billion. Why have Silver, Hansson, and Doerr done so well? There are two types of answers to this question. The first are micro in scope and focus on the personality traits and tactics that help drive this trio's rise. The second type of answers are more macro in that they focus less on the individuals and more on the type of work they represent. Though both approaches to this core question are important, the macro answers will prove most relevant to our discussion, as they better illuminate what our current economy rewards. To explore this macro perspective, we turn to a pair of MIT economists, Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, who in their influential 2011 book, Race Against the Machine, provide a compelling case that among various forces at play, it's the rise of digital technology in particular that's transforming our labor markets in unexpected ways. We are in the early throes of a great restructuring. Brynjolfsson and McAfee explain early in their book, our technologies are racing ahead but many of our skills and organizations are lagging behind. For many workers, this lag predicts bad news. As intelligent machines improve, and the gap between machine and human ability shrinks, employers are becoming increasingly likely to hire new machines instead of new people, and when only a human will do. Improvements in communications and collaboration technology are making remote work easier than ever before, motivating companies to outsource key roles to stars, leaving the local talent pool underemployed. This reality is not, however, universally grim. As Brynjolfsson and McAfee emphasize, this great restructuring is not driving down all jobs but is instead dividing them. Though an increasing number of people will lose in this new economy as their skill becomes automatable or easily outsourced, there are others who will not only survive, but thrive, becoming more valued, and therefore more rewarded, than before. Brynjolfsson and McAfee aren't alone in proposing this bimodal trajectory for the economy. In 2013, for example, the George Mason economist Tyler Cowen published Average is Over, a book that echoes this thesis of a digital division. But what makes Brynjolfsson and McAfee's analysis particularly useful is that they proceed to identify three specific groups that will fall on the lucrative side of this divide and reap a disproportionate amount of the benefits of the intelligent machine age. Not surprisingly, it's to these three groups that Silver, Hansson, and Doerr happen to belong. Let's touch on each of these groups in turn to better understand why they're suddenly so valuable. The high-skilled workers. Brynjolfsson and McAfee call the group personified by Nate Silver the high-skilled workers. Advances such as robotics and voice recognition are automating many low-skilled positions, but as these economists emphasize, other technologies like data visualization, analytics, high-speed communications, and rapid prototyping have augmented the contributions of more abstract and data-driven reasoning, increasing the values of these jobs. In other words, those with the oracular ability to work within T's valuable results out of increasingly complex machines will thrive. Tyler Cowen summarizes this reality more bluntly. The key question will be, are you good at working with intelligent machines or not? Nate Silver, of course, with his comfort in feeding data into large databases, then siphoning it out into his mysterious Monte Carlo simulations, is the epitome of the high-skilled worker. Intelligent machines are not an obstacle to Silver's success, but instead provide its precondition. The superstars. The ace programmer David Heinemeier Hansson provides an example of the second group that Brynjolfsson and McAfee predict will thrive in our new economy. Superstars. High-speed data networks and collaboration tools like email and virtual meeting software have destroyed regionalism in many sectors of knowledge work. It no longer makes sense, for example, to hire a full-time programmer, put aside office space, and pay benefits, when you can instead pay one of the world's best programmers, like Hansen, for just enough time to complete the project at hand. In this scenario, you'll probably get a better result for less money, while Hansen can service many more clients per year, and will therefore also end up better off. The fact that Hansen might be working remotely from Marbella, Spain, while your office is in Des Moines, Iowa, doesn't matter to your company, as advances in communication and collaboration technology make the process near seamless. This reality does matter, however, to the less skilled local programmers living in Des Moines and in need of a steady paycheck. This same trend holds for the growing number of fields where technology makes productive remote work possible: consulting, marketing, writing, design, and so on. Once the talent market is made universally accessible, those at the peak of the market thrive while the rest suffer. In a seminal 1981 paper, the economist Sherwin Rosen worked out the mathematics behind these winner-take-all markets. One of his key insights was to explicitly model talent labeled, innocuously, with a variable g in his formulas as a factor with imperfect substitution, which Rosen explains as follows: hearing a succession of mediocre singers does not add up to a single outstanding performance. In other words, talent is not a commodity you can buy in bulk and combine to reach the needed levels. There's a premium to being the best. Therefore, if you're in a marketplace where the consumer has access to all performers, and everyone's value is clear, the consumer will choose the very best, even if the talent advantage of the best is small compared to the next rung down on the skill ladder. The superstars still win the bulk of the market. In the 1980s, when Rosen studied this effect, he focused on examples like movie stars and musicians, where there existed clear markets, such as music stores and movie theaters, where an audience has access to different performers and can accurately approximate their talent before making a purchasing decision. The rapid rise of communication and collaboration technologies has transformed many other formerly local markets into a similarly universal bazaar. The small company looking for a computer programmer or public relations consultant now has access to an international marketplace of talent in the same way that the advent of the record store allowed the small-town music fan to bypass local musicians to buy albums from the world's best bands. The superstar effect, in other words, has a broader application today than Rosen could have predicted 30 years ago. An increasing number of individuals in our economy are now competing with the rock stars of their sectors. The owners, the final group that will thrive in our new economy, the group epitomized by John Doerr, consists of those with capital to invest in the new technologies that are driving the great restructuring. As we've understood since Marx, access to capital provides massive advantages. It's also true, however, that some periods offer more advantages than others. As Brynjolfsson and McAfee point out, post-war Europe was an example of a bad time to be sitting on a pile of cash, as the combination of rapid inflation and aggressive taxation wiped out old fortunes with surprising speed, what we might call the Downton Abbey effect. The Great Restructuring, unlike the post-war period, is a particularly good time to have access to capital. To understand why, first recall that bargaining theory, a key component in standard economic thinking, argues that when money is made through the combination of capital investment and labor, the rewards are returned, roughly speaking, proportional to the input. As digital technology reduces the need for labor in many industries, the proportion of the rewards returned to those who own the intelligent machines is growing. A venture capitalist in today's economy can fund a company like Instagram, which was eventually sold for $1 billion, while employing only 13 people. When else in history could such a small amount of labor be involved in such a large amount of value, with so little input from labor? The proportion of this wealth that flows back to the machine owners, in this case, the venture investors, is without precedent. It's no wonder that a venture capitalist I interviewed for my last book admitted to me with some concern, "Everyone wants my job." Let's pull together the threads spun so far. Current economic thinking, as I've surveyed, argues that the unprecedented growth and impact of technology are creating a massive restructuring of our economy. In this new economy, three groups will have a particular advantage: those who can work well and creatively with intelligent machines, those who are the best at what they do, and those with access to capital. To be clear, this great restructuring identified by economists like Brynjolfsson, McAfee, and Cohen is not the only economic trend of importance at the moment, and the three groups mentioned previously are not the only groups who will do well. But what's important for this book's argument is that these trends, even if not alone, are important, and these groups, even if they are not the only such groups, will thrive if you can join any of these groups. Therefore, you'll do well. If you cannot, you might still do well, but your position is more precarious. The question we must now face is the obvious one: how does one join these winners? At the risk of quelling your rising enthusiasm, I should first confess that I have no secret for quickly amassing capital and becoming the next John Doerr. If I had such secrets, it's unlikely I'd share them in a book. The other two winning groups, however, are accessible. How to access them is the goal we tackle next. How to become a winner in the new economy. I just identified two groups that are poised to thrive and that I claim are accessible. Those who can work creatively with intelligent machines and those who are stars in their field. What's the secret to landing in these lucrative sectors of the widening digital divide? I argue that the following two core abilities are crucial. Two core abilities for thriving in the new economy. 1. The ability to quickly master hard things. 2. The ability to produce at an elite level, in terms of both quality and speed. Let's begin with the first ability. To start, we must remember that we've been spoiled by the intuitive and drop-dead simple user experience of many consumer-facing technologies, like Twitter and the iPhone. These examples, however, are consumer products, not serious tools. Most of the intelligent machines driving the great restructuring are significantly more complex to understand and master. Consider Nate Silver, our earlier example of someone who thrives by working well with complicated technology. If we dive deeper into his methodology, we discover that generating data-driven election forecasts is not as easy as typing who will win more votes into a search box. He instead maintains a large database of poll results, thousands of polls from more than 250 pollsters, that he feeds into Stata, a popular statistical analysis system produced by a company called Stata Corp. These are not easy tools to master. Here, for example, is the type of command you need to understand to work with a modern database like Silver uses. Create view cities as select name, population, altitude from capitals union select name, population, altitude from non-capitals. Databases of this type are interrogated in a language called SQL. You send them commands like the one shown here to interact with their stored information. Understanding how to manipulate these databases is subtle. The example command, for example, creates a view, a virtual database table that pulls together data from multiple existing tables, and that can then be addressed by the SQL commands like a standard table. When to create views and how to do so well is a tricky question, one of many that you must understand and master to tease reasonable results out of real-world databases. Sticking with our Nate Silver case study, consider the other technology he relies on, Stata. This is a powerful tool, and definitely not something you can learn intuitively after some modest tinkering. Here, for example, is a description of the features added to the most recent version of this software. Stata 13 adds many new features such as treatment effects, multi-level GLM, power and sample size, generalized SEM, forecasting, effect sizes, project manager, long strings and blobs, and much more. Silver uses this complex software with its generalized SEM and blobs to build intricate models with interlocking parts, multiple regressions, conducted on custom parameters, which are then referenced as custom weights used in probabilistic expressions, and so on. The point of providing these details is to emphasize that intelligent machines are complicated and hard to master. To join the group of those who can work well with these machines, therefore, requires that you hone your ability to master hard things, and because these technologies change rapidly, this process of mastering hard things never ends. You must be able to do it quickly, again and again. This ability to learn hard things quickly, of course, isn't just necessary for working well with intelligent machines, it also plays a key role in the attempt to become a superstar in just about any field, even those that have little to do with technology. To become a world-class yoga instructor, for example, requires that you master an increasingly complex set of physical skills. To excel in a particular area of medicine, to give another example, requires that you be able to quickly master the latest research on relevant procedures. To summarize these observations more succinctly, if you can't learn, you can't thrive. Now consider the second core ability from the list shown earlier, producing at an elite level. If you want to become a superstar, mastering the relevant skills is necessary, but not the complex reality of the technologies that real companies leverage to get ahead emphasizes the absurdity of the now common idea that exposure to simplistic, consumer-facing products, especially in schools, somehow prepares people to succeed in a high-tech economy. Giving students iPads or allowing them to film homework assignments on YouTube prepares them for a high-tech economy about as much as playing with Hot Wheels would prepare them to thrive as auto mechanics sufficient. You must then transform that latent potential into tangible results that people value. Many developers, for example, can program computers well, but David Hanson, our example superstar from earlier, leveraged this ability to produce Ruby on Rails, the project that made his reputation. Ruby on Rails required Hanson to push his current skills to their limit and produce unambiguously valuable and concrete results. This ability to produce also applies to those looking to master intelligent machines. It wasn't enough for Nate Silver to learn how to manipulate large data sets and run statistical analyses. He needed to then show that he could use this skill to tease information from these machines that a large audience cared about. Silver worked with many stats geeks during his days at Baseball Prospectus, but it was Silver alone who put in the effort to adapt these skills to the new and more lucrative territory of election forecasting. This provides another general observation for joining the ranks of winners in our economy. If you don't produce, you won't thrive no matter how skilled or talented you are. Having established two abilities that are fundamental to getting ahead in our new, technology-disrupted world, we can now ask the obvious follow-up question: how does one cultivate these core abilities? It's here that we arrive at a central thesis of this book. The two core abilities just described depend on your ability to perform deep work. If you haven't mastered this foundational skill, you'll struggle to learn hard things or produce at an elite level. The dependence of these abilities on deep work isn't immediately obvious. It requires a closer look at the science of learning, concentration, and productivity. The sections ahead provide this closer look, and by doing so will help this connection between deep work and economic success shift for you from unexpected to unimpeachable. Deep work helps you quickly learn hard things. Let your mind become a lens. Thanks to the converging rays of attention, let your soul be all intent on whatever it is that is established in your mind as a dominant, wholly absorbing idea. This advice comes from Anton Indalmus Satyyanj, a Dominican friar and professor of moral philosophy, who during the early part of the 20th century penned a slim but influential volume titled The Intellectual Life. Satyyanj wrote the book as a guide to the development and deepening of the mind for those called to make a living in the world of ideas. Throughout the intellectual life, Satyyanj recognizes the necessity of mastering complicated material and helps prepare the reader for this challenge. For this reason, his book proves useful in our quest to better understand how people quickly master hard, cognitive, skills. To understand Satyanj's advice, let's return to the quote from earlier. In these words, which are echoed in many forms in the intellectual life, Satyanj argues that to advance your understanding of your field you must tackle the relevant topics systematically, allowing your converging rays of attention to uncover the truth latent in each. In other words, he teaches, to learn requires intense concentration. This idea turns out to be ahead of its time. In reflecting on the life of the mind in the 1920s, Satyanj uncovered a fact about mastering cognitively demanding tasks that would take academia another 7 decades to formalize. This task of formalization began in earnest in the 1970s, when a branch of psychology, sometimes called performance psychology, began to systematically explore what separates experts, in many different fields, from everyone else. In the early 1990s, K. Anders Ericsson, a professor at Florida State University, pulled together these strands into a single coherent answer, consistent with the growing research literature, that he gave a punchy name: deliberate practice. Ericsson opens his seminal paper on the topic with a powerful claim: we deny that these differences, between expert performers and normal adults, are immutable. Instead, we argue that the differences between expert performers and normal adults reflect a lifelong period of deliberate effort to improve performance in a specific domain. American culture, in particular, loves the storyline of the prodigy. Do you know how easy this is for me? Matt Damon's character famously cries in the movie Good Will Hunting as he makes quick work of proofs that stymie the world's top mathematicians. The line of research promoted by Ericsson, and now widely accepted, with caveats, after Malcolm Gladwell popularized the idea of deliberate practice in his 2008 bestseller, Outliers, The Story of Success, it became fashionable stabilizes these myths. To master a cognitively demanding task requires this specific form of practice. There are few exceptions made for natural talent. On this point too, Satyanj seems to have been ahead of his time, arguing in the intellectual life, men of genius themselves were great only by bringing all their power to bear on the point on which they had decided to show their full measure. Ericsson couldn't have said it better. This brings us to the question of what deliberate practice actually requires. Its core components are usually identified as follows. 1. Your attention is focused tightly on a specific skill you're trying to improve or an idea you're trying to master. 2. You receive feedback so you can correct your approach to keep your attention exactly where it's most productive. The first component is of particular importance to our discussion, as it emphasizes that deliberate practice cannot exist alongside distraction, and that it instead requires uninterrupted concentration. As Ericsson emphasizes, diffused attention, within psychology circles, a group suspicious, generally speaking, of all things Gladwellian, to poke holes in the deliberate practice hypothesis. For the most part, however, these studies did not invalidate the necessity of deliberate practice, but instead attempted to identify other components also playing a role in expert performance. In a 2013 journal article, titled Why Expert Performance is Special and Cannot be Extrapolated from Studies of Performance in the General Population, a response to criticisms, and published in the journal Intelligence 45, 2014, 81-103, Ericsson pushed back on many of these studies. In this article, Ericsson argues, among other things, that the experimental designs of these critical papers are often flawed because they assume you can extrapolate the difference between average and above average in a given field to the difference between expert and non-expert, is almost antithetical to the focused attention required by deliberate practice. Emphasis mine. As psychologists, Ericsson and the other researchers in his field are not interested in why deliberate practice works. They're just identifying it as an effective behavior. in the intervening decades since Erickson's first major papers on the topic. However, neuroscientists have been exploring the physical mechanisms that drive people's improvements on hard tasks. As the journalist Daniel Coyle surveys in his 2009 book, The Talent Code, these scientists increasingly believe the answer includes myelin, a layer of fatty tissue that grows around neurons, acting like an insulator that allows the cells to fire faster and cleaner. To understand the role of myelin in improvement, keep in mind that skills, be they intellectual or physical, eventually reduce down to brain circuits. This new science of performance argues that you get better at a skill as you develop more myelin around the relevant neurons, allowing the corresponding circuit to fire more effortlessly and effectively. To be great at something is to be well myelinated. This understanding is important because it provides a neurological foundation for why deliberate practice works. By focusing intensely on a specific skill, you're forcing the specific relevant circuit to fire, again and again, in isolation. This repetitive use of a specific circuit triggers cells called oligodendrocytes to begin wrapping layers of myelin around the neurons in the circuits, effectively cementing the skill. The reason, therefore, why it's important to focus intensely on the task at hand while avoiding distraction is because this is the only way to isolate the relevant neural circuit enough to trigger useful myelination. By contrast, if you're trying to learn a complex new skill, say, SQL database management in a state of low concentration, perhaps you also have your Facebook feed open. You're firing too many circuits simultaneously and haphazardly to isolate the group of neurons you actually want to strengthen. In the century that has passed since Antonin Dalmas-Satyyanj first wrote about using the mind like a lens to focus rays of attention, we have advanced from this elevated metaphor to a decidedly less poetic explanation expressed in terms of oligodendrocyte cells. But this sequence of thinking about thinking points to an inescapable conclusion: to learn hard things quickly, you must focus intensely without distraction. To learn, in other words, is an act of deep work. If you're comfortable going deep, you'll be comfortable mastering the increasingly complex systems and skills needed to thrive in our economy. If you instead remain one of the many for whom depth is uncomfortable and distraction ubiquitous, you shouldn't expect these systems and skills to come easily to you.